Hello there and happy Wednesday afternoon to you. My name is Brent Lyles and I have the great honor of serving as Executive Director of the Mountain Lion Foundation. Our organization is a member-funded, not-for-profit organization with a mission to ensure that mountain lions survive and flourish in the wild. We do this work with programming across the country focused on three areas: education, coexistence, and policy and advocacy. This is our Living with Lions webinar series. We do it monthly, and it is usually focused on coexistence, and things will be a little bit different today. But before I get to that, I'd like to welcome all of you. We've got registrations for this webinar today from all over the country, and I wanted to share that list with y'all because it's kind of amazing. Here we go. Arizona, California, Colorado, Florida, Illinois, Indiana, Massachusetts, Maryland, Michigan, Mississippi, Montana, North Carolina, New Mexico, Nevada, New York, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Texas, Utah, Virginia, Washington, and even a couple of folks from other countries. Wow. So I bid all of you very, very welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And I hope I didn't miss anyone. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. And of course, I also have to say hi to my mom who's on the line today. Hi, Mom. Hi, Tom. Hi, Aunt Bobby. Good to see you. So today's webinar is a little different from our typical webinar. It's going to be more of a conversation than a presentation, because although I'll definitely share a bit of information with you all up front about our successes from this past year and also some of our plans for the year ahead, after I've talked for about 15 or 20 minutes, I'm going to leave the rest of our time together today for questions from you about what the Mountain Lion Foundation is up to or questions about mountain lions. You've set aside the time to be here today, and I want to respect that and make sure you leave here with the things you're curious about having been addressed. So you'll see a button down at the bottom of your Zoom screen for Q&A, and that's where you type in whatever questions you might have. Feel free to ask those questions at any time, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. Before we dive in here, I want to mention that here at the Mountain Lion Foundation, we are in the midst of our year-end fundraising campaign. And we could not do what we do without the generous financial investments of our members. We don't have corporate sponsorships. We don't have government grants. All of this work we're going to talk about today is funded entirely by members like you. So please send in a donation, send us a check, go to mountainlion.org and make an online donation, donate some stock, include us in your estate, all of the above, however it works for you. And of course, don't do it for me, do it for the mountain lions. These incredible animals are out there on the landscape across our country, and the threats they face are growing by the day. Our ecosystems, our food webs, America's rich natural heritage has depended for millennia and still depends today on mountain lions. And that's especially true right now as the impacts of the climate crisis unfold day by day. The time to act is right now, and the work of the Mountain Lion Foundation is making a difference. We've got to grow this work and grow this organization to meet the challenges ahead. So I ask you to please dig deep this month and help us accomplish great things for mountain lions in 2024. Alrighty, 2023 is winding down, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you. I began my tenure as Executive Director of the Mountain Lion Foundation in October of 2022. So it's been just over a year. And as I look back over that year, we've really come a long way. And I'm proud of what we've gotten done together and the changes we've made to our work and our organization. Our impact for lions is growing. Now, for those of you who are here listening today, I probably don't have to go into a lot of detail about all of the challenges that mountain lions face across our country. Loss of habitat, fragmentation of habitat, collisions with lions along roads, the climate crisis, right? Droughts, floods, enormous wildfires. And let's not forget the ruthless and needless overhunting of lions, which we see in almost every Western state. Suffice it to say that the work of the Mountain Lion Foundation is needed more than ever. There is one thing I want to add, though, which may not be so obvious. As our country has become more and more fractured in recent years, as socio-political divides have become so contentious, wildlife are often getting thrown under the bus. Decisions about wildlife stewardship at the state and federal level are more and more political by the day. Decisions about wildlife, even small decisions, get swept up in these false and counterproductive narratives about post-truth and the so-called culture wars in the United States. I mention this because it means that the challenges of doing this work in today's world. For instance, when we're trying to propose a rational science-based reduction in mountain lion hunting in one region of one state, the challenges of that advocacy work look very different today than they did 10 or even 5 years ago. And so what do you do about that? Here at the Mountain Lion Foundation, how do we navigate that fractious landscape and actually get stuff done? For me, it always comes back to values. And this sounds corny, but I believe in people's inherent goodness and that people want to do the right thing, whatever that means for them, right? I believe in the power of authentic connection and authentic communication between people and helping us all overcome the obstacles that we face in working together. So I encounter people who I may initially disagree with, right? And I connect with them. I listen. I respect their perspective and their values. I try to build authenticity and trust. And that works. It's hard and it takes time. But that's how I come to this work. And it's why I'm ultimately hopeful, not just about the future of mountain lions. I believe that if we do this work, their future is very bright. But also I'm hopeful for the future of this world that we live in. Now, I strayed a bit from what I was saying earlier about the challenges that mountain lions face across the country, but hopefully that helps you understand me a little bit better and where I'm coming from as executive director of the Mountain Lion Foundation. Now, all of these challenges facing mountain lions were on our minds as the Mountain Lion Foundation's staff and board of directors were wrapping up 2022 and heading into 2023 just a year ago. Something I was personally excited about was that we launched an organizational strategic planning initiative in the spring of 2023. As part of that lengthy process, which is still ongoing, first off, we sought input from our members and donors. Some of you probably responded to our member survey last spring, and thank you for that. We also reached out for suggestions and advice from other wildlife organizations, our partners, working scientists, representatives from indigenous nations, and thoughtful leaders from across the social and political spectrum. What emerged from that strategic planning process were 3 key organizational priorities for our work. And I'm going to share this slide with you real quick. And hopefully you can see that. Let me know if not. So these are our program priorities for this year, for 2023, and moving forward in the next couple of years. First off, champion broad protections for mountain lions and their habitats across the United States. And this is the policy and advocacy work that we engage in across the country, engaging partners and coalitions and trying to get stronger protections in place for mountain lions wherever they live. Number 2, cultivate proactive, community-based coexistence for people and lions. And this means helping people who are on the front lines, ranchers, people in the suburbs in lion country, first responders, helping them learn about non-lethal responses to encounters with lions so that they and their families and their livestock can stay safe, while also ensuring the safety of the lions in their midst. Number 3, foster a deep appreciation of mountain lions and their ecological significance. This priority is all about communications, sharing the best science about mountain lions, busting the many myths about them, working with the media to help lions get positive coverage instead of inaccurate, sensationalist coverage. We are the hub of the best mountain lion information. So these are our 3 strategic priorities for our programs for the Mountain Lion Foundation. And these were developed and refined by our staff and board with input from those members and those partners and so on. And as I think about the successes that we've had over this past year in 2023, I think about those successes in terms of these 3 priorities. So first off, protection and advocacy. You've likely already heard us talk about the lawsuit in Utah that we launched this year in partnership with the Utah-based Western Wildlife Conservancy. That lawsuit seeks to overturn one of the most dangerous laws in decades because it basically opened up unlimited hunting and trapping of lions in Utah year-round. Now, an update on that, just last week, the state of Utah responded to that lawsuit with a motion to have the lawsuit dismissed. This is a fairly standard and predictable tactic by a state to sidestep accountability, if I may say so, and our legal team is busy right now preparing the response. Also this past year, We joined an inspiring coalition of advocates in Colorado to end lion trophy hunting in that state. That ballot measure will go before the Colorado voters as part of next year's elections. And the next step is signature gathering. It's a long campaign, and it will be really important over this next year to gather momentum, gather those signatures, get this on the ballot, let people know what's at stake. You'll be hearing from us more about this in January and February as we begin that signature gathering phase. In 2023, the Mountain Lion Foundation also joined a big coalition in California. And together that coalition successfully outlawed some very potent rodenticides that were sickening mountain lions and other wildlife in California. We also spent considerable time in Washington state, working with partners to begin dialing back excessive cougar hunting in that state. In fact, we've just sent out action alerts just in the last few days to our Washington members about an opportunity to speak up for lions at Washington State Wildlife Commission next week. As a national organization, we try to keep an eye out for threats to lions everywhere and for opportunities to engage. This year, we spoke out all across the West, opposing increases in mountain lion hunting for the most part. There are people out there pushing hard for more mountain lion hunting. And the Mountain Lion Foundation is there every time, pushing back and working for protecting these magnificent and important animals. So the second key organizational priority, proactive coexistence. We get emails and phone calls from folks all the time needing support in their community or in their homes with active mountain lion populations. Sometimes it's a sheep rancher who's just lost some sheep because they didn't have a lion-proof enclosure, or sometimes it's just someone calling to say, hey, I got a lion in my backyard. What do I do? That's coexistence, right? Living in peace with our lion neighbors. In addition to responding to all of these requests this year, the Mountain Lion Foundation also formalized and piloted 2 new coexistence programs in 2023 in Washington and California. And I'm especially excited about these. We piloted them in Washington and California, but they are both national programs. The first is called Coexistence in Practice. And it offers coexistence tools and intensive hands-on trainings to local communities across the country. It's almost like a place-based intervention. We piloted that program in Klickitat County, Washington in August. The second program is, we call it the Coexistence Ambassadors Program, prepares individual advocates to educate their neighbors and local leaders about how to live in peace with lions. It also trains these ambassadors to fight for the protection of lions in their communities. That training took place in Northern California and brought in ambassadors from 6 different states. In fact, some of those ambassadors are actually listening today. Thank you for your work, Coexistence Ambassadors. Third priority is outreach and education. And in 2023, we were fostering a deep appreciation of mountain lions and their ecological importance, right? And that is all about communication. This year, we created a new staff position at the Mountain Lion Foundation, the Director of Communications. And this allowed us to take an enormous level up in terms of all of our communications functions, our newsletters, social media, our website, our media support systems. If you've been following if you've been following us, as many of you on this webinar today have been, I'm sure you've noticed the difference. The impact is that we've reached thousands more people across the country this year. We provided the most up-to-date scientific information to decision makers in the media, and we earned national and statewide media attention. We also relaunched this webinar series, Living with Lions, and we expanded our organizational partnerships in order to multiply our impact. Now, in addition to these programmatic successes in these 3 programmatic areas, we also made some changes behind the scenes to support our staff and our operations. Wanted to share those with you because those are important to me as executive director. We reorganized staff responsibilities to align better with our programs. We strengthened our staff benefits, and we prioritized having healthy work-life balances. We restructured some of our financial systems to facilitate greater efficiency and transparency. I'm proud of the progress we've made in this area, and together these changes are helping our organization to be as strong and lean as a mountain lion. So looking ahead to 2024, many of these programmatic initiatives, including especially our work in Colorado and Utah and Washington, our newly launched coexistence programs, our outreach programming, all of this will continue and expand in the coming year. We also are planning new coalition-based projects for lion protection in California, Nevada, and we're excited about a new potential outreach partnership in Montana. In addition to those, guided by the input we received during our strategic planning process, we'll also be exploring opportunities. One of them is the education of school-aged children. That came up in our strategic planning process as a need that's out there. And also something that's on the horizon is the reintroduction, hopefully, of mountain lions in eastern states. And what does that mean? And what is the groundwork that needs to be in place before that happens? So this is looking ahead to 24. It's going to be really exciting. I'm super jazzed about all of this and the times ahead. You know, if you're supporting this work financially or through your volunteer time, this is your work too. We're all in this together. Now, before we wrap up this presentation part of the program today, I want to share something else with you. And I wrote about this in greater detail in an email to our members recently. So some of you likely saw that. It has to do with the why of this work, specifically the work pushing back against the needless and ruthless trophy hunting of mountain lions. Why are we so passionate about this? Why are we passionate about ending the trophy hunting of mountain lions? So what I want to mention here, and I mentioned in that email, is that the Mountain Lion Foundation's work across the country is rooted in science, and it's rooted in this organization's longstanding values, science and values. So let's talk about that. First, the science. Decades of peer-reviewed scientific studies are clear. There is little scientific justification for hunting mountain lions. And there's plenty of scientific justification for not hunting them. Now, the rhetoric we hear out there is that mountain lion populations are exploding and, you know, we need to kill the mountain lions so that deer and elk populations will recover. So let me break down the responses to some of these myths, because they are myths. First of all, mountain lion populations are self-regulating. On a landscape, there is enough room for a certain number of territories of adult mountain lions. Once that landscape is filled with territories, established territories, there's no room for more territories. And so if a population ever threatens to grow beyond that capacity, those extra mountain lions are usually, unfortunately, either killed by other lions in territorial disputes, or they leave. They leave to find their own territories elsewhere. So mountain lions populations don't explode. They're self-limiting and self-regulating. What's more, research tells us that increasing lion hunting almost never works as a management strategy to boost deer and elk populations. Therefore, reducing mountain lion populations through hunting is not needed or justified. Now, what's more, and you know this, mountain lions serve critical and irreplaceable functions in healthy ecosystems wherever they live. These healthy ecosystems are more resilient in the face of climate change, right? And that's really important right now. There's little scientific justification for hunting them, and there's plenty of scientific justification for not hunting them. So second, this recreational hunting of mountain lions, or trophy hunting, results in needless and ruthless deaths of mountain lions. The Mountain Lion Foundation respects the diversity of value systems that exist across the Americas, right? We acknowledge that ethical hunting, and especially hunting for sustenance, is an important part of past and present human value systems. All value systems deserve respect. And these value systems include indigenous lifeways and cultural practices in North and South America. Now, since hunting mountain lions is not needed for population control, deer population control, or for public safety, indeed, hunting lions can make communities less safe. And because hunting lions for sustenance is so uncommon, the primary remaining justification for mountain lion hunting is usually for sport or trophies. And this is needless killing of mountain lions. Moreover, the hunting of mountain lions, as it's currently legally practiced in most Western states, not many people realize that mountain lion hunting is legal in most Western states. That hunting usually relies on high-tech gadgetry, such as GPS collars for hounds. It relies on that much more than on the skill of a hunter. It also ends with a mountain lion cornered in a tree, helpless to escape a bullet or arrow. The Mountain Lion Foundation believes, and I believe, that this practice is ruthless, and it pushes the boundaries of so-called fair chase and hunting beyond what is morally acceptable. So in summary, the science tells us that mountain lions are critically important, especially in the face of climate change, and that trophy hunting serves little justifiable purpose. Our values tell us that needless and ruthless killing of lions is unacceptable. That is why we do this work. All righty, we're about to jump into our Q&A. So get your questions ready. But before we do, I want to take this year-end opportunity to acknowledge and personally thank some very important people. First and foremost, the dedicated team who works here as the staff of the Mountain Lion Foundation. Chelsea Robinson, our operations manager, is actually helping right now behind the scenes to make this webinar go smoothly. Thank you, Chelsea. Our program staff includes Gowan Batiste, our coexistence programs manager, Josh Rosenau, our director of policy and advocacy, who's actually just jumped on to help as part of our Q&A, Paige Munson, a trained field biologist who's part of our policy and advocacy team, along with Josh, and also our director of communications, who manages all of the content that goes out there into the world, inspiring people with science-based and fun information about mountain lions. We're actually just now finalizing the hiring of our new director of communications, and I'll be able to announce her name soon. Erica Matthews and Lou Galgani are critically important to our team as well, helping make sure that our members and donors are well cared for, well informed, and well engaged with our work. Many of you on the call are very familiar with Erica and Lou. I'd also like to thank our board of directors, who don't often get credit for their thoughtful and strategic governance of this organization. That's Board Chair Bob McCoy in Washington State, Vice Chair Chris Tromborg in California, Treasurer Bruce Rylander in Oregon, and Secretary Don Moldy in Nevada, as well as Toby Cooper in Washington, Elizabeth Sullivan in California, and Fauna Tomlinson in California and Nevada. Thank you, board members. You are appreciated. And of course, our many volunteers, partners, and advocates around the country, including those newly minted coexistence ambassadors that I was just telling you about. We wouldn't have any of these successes we've talked about today without the help of our volunteers and our partners. Thank you. All righty, Josh is here, so let's get to some of those questions. All right, I'm going to, and Chelsea, why don't you go ahead and not share that screen so that we can get a better look at Josh and me as we're answering these questions. And hello, Josh. Thanks for joining us. Oh, I see. Q&A. There we go. I'm looking at the wrong place. So, well, we've got a whole bunch of questions here. So I'm kind of looking through it, and I'm going to grab one. Could you elaborate on the reintroduction of cougars to eastern states? What would that look like? Josh, would you like to field the first part of that one?
Sure. There are different ideas that circulate, anything from, and we've seen actually some version of this in Florida, which is the only holdout of the otherwise extinct eastern panther. And there, because of the low genetic diversity that the population was facing, they a couple times translocated lions from Texas to Florida to bring a little bit of new genetic material into the population. And so we've seen a little bit of how it can work to do that. And so there are ideas that circulate of we can actually do that to places where there are large enough chunks of intact eastern woodland that you could move a few cougars out there and let them breed, and now you've got an eastern panther population again. The other idea that is happening, although albeit quite slowly, is to just let nature take its course. And if we don't overhunt what's happening, what the populations that have reestablished themselves in the last 20 years or so in Nebraska and the Dakotas, my camera froze. If we just let those populations continue breeding at reasonable rates, over time, they will continue spreading eastward and reoccupy, recolonize states where they were extirpated 50 years ago or more. And we're seeing that slowly, but again, as Brent said, we've seen increased hunting in a bunch of those frontline states, and a lot of them have policies that are premised on keeping those populations small. And because females move relatively slowly, they tend to stay close to mom, and the males move long distances. Those males get out to Illinois, and there's no one to mate with, which means that they're not going to leave offspring, and the population can't reestablish until those females manage to make it there, which just takes longer. And so we could, if we wanted to, juice the process a little bit and just grab a few of those females and move them further out. But there are objections from some of the people who live out there. So there's a little bit of work that has to happen on the ground before that can happen.
I want to add too that there's been some really cool research just within the last year or so about where the best habitat for mountain lions might be across the eastern states, in terms of size of wilderness and things like that. So it's cool. This is something we're going to be talking about a lot in the coming years, I think. All right, next question. This is kind of a softball question. Thank you to whoever sent it in. Is it important to push for more democratic representation in wildlife management, which is now mostly controlled by hunters? It is. Thank you for bringing this up. Let me start first with the explanation that a lot of decisions about wildlife stewardship happen at the state level, because there was another question about whether it's a federal question or a state question. Most of those decisions about how wildlife are treated happen at the state level. And often the body that is most influential in these decisions is that state wildlife commission. And so in different states, it's called slightly different things, but basically it is a commission of around 9 or so people who are appointed to serve as wildlife advisors, essentially, to that state. Now, traditionally, those wildlife commissions have been staffed, or the appointees have largely come from the hunting community, and there are efforts underway, and the Mountain Lion Foundation is participating in these. I actually just gave a talk on this at a conference in Louisville a couple weeks ago. Mountain Lion Foundation is participating in conversations about how do we move forward, right? As we look ahead, state wildlife agencies are responsible for hunting and hunting management in their states, and they are also responsible for all wildlife for the public good. And as the impacts of climate change grow, it's really important that the decisions being made about the wildlife bring in more scientific opinion, bring in the perspectives of people who hike and mountain bike in mountain lion country. What that means is not, let's take this power away from hunters. And I want to be clear about that. That effort is not an anti-hunting effort. The effort is to democratize the process so that when these wildlife stewardship decisions are getting made by these state agencies, that more voices are at the table participating in those decision-making processes. Anyway, very exciting movement within wildlife. And there's a group called Wildlife for All that Mountain Lion Foundation is a partner with, that is kind of leading the charge on that. Anyway, I could talk all day about that one, and that's an exciting thing, but let me move on to a next question here.
I'll just jump in really quickly, and because not everyone may have seen the question as it was typed. That's lowercase d democratic. It's making it accessible to the public. This is not about partisanship. This is an issue that historically has crossed partisan lines and should continue to. It's not about but it is about allowing the full public to be involved in decisions that affect everyone in the public. Everyone, all of us love mountain lions. In many cases, these state agencies were founded as game agencies or fisheries agencies, game and fisheries, right? The extracted product rather than wildlife. And that's a change that's been happening. And it's in some cases slowly. And a lot of these commissions were created and continue to operate in ways that narrow the constituency that can influence them. And there's a lot of work, as Brent said, to try to broaden that, because wildlife does belong to all of us and to itself.
Thank you. Next question came from Wade. Thank you, Wade. Do you collaborate across borders? Obviously, lions cross borders, and those are, I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but those borders are invisible to mountain lions, right? So not just state borders, but also national borders. The answer is yes and no. We have done a little bit of collaborating across national borders, but not a whole lot. And then I part of it is that as our organization has grown, our history is that we were focused just on California, and then it has expanded from there. And today we're a national organization. There are efforts and other organizations and advocates in Canada, in Mexico, and of course, mountain lions roam all the way. You know, they live all the way from North America's kind of, once you start hitting sort of the Arctic, right, all the way down to the southern tip of South America. So it's a really wide-ranging species, one of the most wide-ranging. And we are working with our capacity as an organization, which is mostly United States focused. And I would love to foresee a day when we expand beyond those borders in a meaningful way. In terms of collaborating across state borders, the answer is yes. As I said, a lot of decisions about mountain lion management happen at the state level. So that is certainly a focus of our work. But one of the things that's really concerning to us is that states are making decisions independent of what their neighboring states have done in terms of mountain lion populations. And this is something Josh wrote about in one of our newsletter articles 4 or 5 months ago, where each mountain lion, what we're seeing is these kind of state decision-making processes with blinders on, saying, well, you know, it's okay if we get rid of more mountain lions because other mountain lions will just come in from other states. But if every state is doing that, then there aren't any mountain lions moving in from other states, right? In scientific terms, we talk about those as source populations and sink populations. Anyway, Josh, is there more than I oversimplified that? But Josh, is there anything you wanted to add about that?
Yeah, and just going back to the discussion about eastern populations, in South Dakota and Nebraska, both in their management plans and in their analysis of their populations, talk about that their populations rely on immigration from Wyoming, Montana. Well, this year we saw both of those states move to shift their management regime, Montana, towards explicitly reducing, especially the eastern population of cougars that they have, and which is going to directly reduce the amount of emigration further eastward. And so we're going to, so that affects those other states. But then in South Dakota and Nebraska, you see increased hunting. And so, but their population depends in part on what's coming in from out of state, and they can't control that. Other states control that. So adding to that coordination and trying to have a more concerted look at these, an animal that can move hundreds of miles, that can readily cross state borders over a lifetime and even have a home range that spans a state border, it should matter. And that also matters. We've done, in the past, Mountain Lion Foundation has done analysis just looking at borders of parks, that often the most intense hunting happens near, but not quite over, the boundary of a park. And it's not like a mountain lion knows where the park boundaries are any more than it knows where a state line is, or an international boundary where that is part of their dynamic. And so it's a big issue. It's a big issue on the southern border, where you've got walls that are obstructing movement of large carnivores and other species across the border, including jaguars and other endangered species that depend on the habitats right along the US-Mexico border.
Thanks, Josh. I got to grab the question about Texas. Josh has sent in, not this Josh, but another Josh has sent in a question asking, where are we in terms of getting cougars protected in Texas in any way? What more can we do to expedite it? Well, I'm not sure if you're based in Jessica. I'm sorry, I was looking at the question from Jessica. I'm not sure if you're based in Texas, Josh, but having lived in Texas for 25 years, I'm always really interested in what's going on with the mountain lions in Texas. And what has happened in the past. So as background, mountain lion hunting is totally unregulated in Texas. It is the only state where mountain lions are still legally considered vermin, which means there's no restrictions on hunting or trapping them. And obviously that's pretty bad if you're a mountain lion. And it's an area of serious concern for us, for the Mountain Lion Foundation. Happily, there's been a little bit of progress, some steps in the right direction, although, it's much more is needed. There is a group that has organized in Texas to fight for protections for mountain lions. And, ironically, one of the ways that mountain lions can get more protection is to be classified as a game species, because then it goes from, at least it goes from unregulated to regulated, right? And that's still mountain lions getting hunted, but at least there's limits on it. So last year, I think it was either late 2022 or early 2023, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Commission created a stakeholder group to study and talk about the question of whether or not mountain lions should be considered game species and other issues related to mountain lions. And that stakeholder group was tasked with making recommendations back to the state commission. I believe that those recommendations either have just happened or about to happen. I've lost track of the date on when that's happening, but that process has moved forward. The state Parks and Wildlife Commission is considering those recommendations, and they're going to decide what to do with it. From there, we move forward. In all likelihood, there's going to be a lot of work still to do with respect to putting protections in place for mountain lions in Texas. And it's interesting. I want to bring something up as well. Everywhere we work, it is important for the Mountain Lion Foundation to have partners on the ground, right? What we don't want to do is come in and act as this, big brother who tells everybody what to do, right? Because that's not going to be successful. And whether that's real or perceived, it makes much more sense for us to be part of coalitions that are happening on the ground, supporting local communities in their own advocacy. And so just as an example, that's what the coexistence in practice effort is about, right? Where we come in and we provide some tools and we provide some materials and trainings and so on and say, here's what we know about mountain lions. Here's some lessons we've learned from other states like California. And, what can we do to support your efforts to advocate for mountain lion protection in your state? All right. Okay, I'm looking through some questions here, and Josh, if you'd like to grab one of these questions, feel free to do so. Let's see. Oh my gosh, there's so many of them. I'm kind of overwhelmed here.
There's a question in the chat that doesn't show up in the Q&A, and the Q&A is going to be an easier place for us to see stuff, but it relates to some things in the Q&A, saying it's illegal to kill a lion in Colorado and not harvest the meat, and asking why the initiative there is focused on trophy hunting. And I think it's worth sort of talking about that language and how this works out in practice, because there's a reason that you don't tend to see carnivore meat at the grocery store, right? Of any sort, around the world and through human history. First of all, there are just so few of them. But also when you look around at the people who are doing mountain lion hunting, a lot of states do have a requirement like that say, the edible portions have to be packed out by the hunter. And hunters have advocated for those provisions for exactly this reason, because it makes it harder to say this is trophy hunting, right? They want to be able to defend this practice that when one of the pollsters that is widely used by state agencies as they want to understand public attitudes towards hunting, a lot of state hunting and fishing regulatory agencies have what are called R3 programs, which try to promote hunting and encourage more people to get involved. And so they want to understand public attitudes about hunting. So one of the questions that he's been asking is about whether people are, support or oppose different sorts of hunting. So deer hunting is widely popular, even among people who don't hunt. And then, hunting African elephants is widely unpopular. The second least popular kind of hunting that he asks about is hunting African lions. And we saw this a few years back. There was that dentist from somewhere in the Southwest California, who went to Africa and shot a lion and posted it on his Instagram and got a lot of grief over it. The third least popular is mountain lion hunting, only slightly more popular than going to Africa and shooting lions on safari. So recognizing that it is an unpopular practice, there is a goal by people who want to preserve mountain lion hunting to take away whatever stigma they can and to not let it be called trophy hunting. So they say we require people to pack out the meat. But when you look at what people are actually interested in, what they're posting those same pictures on Instagram. It is, and they're taking the skins back and they're having it taxidermied. They're having the head prepared as a stuffed mount. They're using it as trophies, and there is it's quite clear to a lot of us that if you were to say you have to pack out the meat and you have to turn all the rest of it over to the Fish and Game Department, you would see a lot of change in how mountain lion hunting happens. And it is functionally a trophy hunt, regardless of whether people have to bring the meat back and do something with it. No one out there in the world is talking seriously about mountain lion meat as some delicacy or as a essential part of almost any. I've actually, there may be some Native American or indigenous peoples throughout the Americas who have relied at some part of the year on mountain lions as food, yeah. But in the 21st century, outside of those traditional practices, there's nobody who is depending for subsistence on mountain lion hunting.
Thank you. Thank you for grabbing that question out of the chat, and I appreciate you clarifying that. The website for that Colorado effort is the group is called Cats Aren't Trophies, and so if you do a Google search for that, you'll find information about that ballot initiative in Colorado. We need to wrap up. We got a ton more questions, and I apologize that we couldn't get to all of them. There's one that I wanted to address quickly. It says, when advocating for lions, can you elaborate on the statement, hunting doesn't work? And what do you mean? Can you elaborate on your statement that lions help biodiversity? This is my opportunity, not so much to get into a lot of depth on these answers, but to share with y'all that the Mountain Lion Foundation's role when it comes to science and the scientific studies and the research and all of that is to be the clearinghouse for that, right? We're not the ones out there doing the research. All of that research happens and is peer reviewed, and there's all the integrity that goes into scientific rigor, right? As for hunting doesn't work, there was a great presentation recently to the Washington Commission, the Washington State Commission, on that very topic. And we could send a link out to that in one of our upcoming newsletters. That'd be great. In fact, we may already have, I think, in one of our recent newsletters. Anyway, and then also the other question was, lions helping biodiversity. Again, there's a ton of studies out there that show that mountain lions are considered these ecosystem architects or keystone species, or however you want to phrase that. But their existence on a landscape, especially through their kill sites, which support hundreds, literally hundreds of other species in terms of the health of those food webs and interactions and that kind of thing, that when the Mountain Lion Foundation, when mountain lions are not on the landscape, the ecosystem and the food web suffers. So in general, that's what I'm talking about. And there's a whole bunch of research out there on both of those topics. All right, we got to stop. Let me wrap things up now. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. I want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here with us today. We're going to take a break from our monthly webinar schedule in January, and then we'll be back in February to start our Living with Lions monthly webinar series for 2024. I mentioned earlier how important all of your year-end donations are to making all of this work possible. So if you're giving $50 or $5,000 or $50,000, please know that every penny counts, and we will put it to good use. The mountain lions and the ecosystems of America, thank you. Also, we do have a few copies left of our 2024 calendar. It turned out really well this year, if I may say so. So reach out to us about getting a copy of that while supplies last. One last thing, one of the most important things you can do to support the protection and recovery of mountain lions, and we actually had a couple of questions about this in the Q&A. What can I do? One of the most important things you can do is to spread the word. When you receive an email newsletter from us or an action alert, please pass it along. Follow us on social media, share our posts. The Mountain Lion Foundation's work is not one person, and it's not just our staff and board, and it's not even just our members. This work will find success by marshaling the power of a broad, diverse, vibrant, creative, passionate coalition of people, all working together to ensure that mountain lions survive and flourish in the wild. Let's do this together. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. And I wish you all a healthy and joyous holiday season.